I'm excited because I'm from the South.
Yeah.
Right? I was born and raised in New Orleans, right? And I know.
It's my second home.
I know, and I also know, you're from the South.
Yeah.
But growing up and having opportunities to cut on the TV, you didn't necessarily get to see a lot of Tamron halls locally.
Yeah.
So what gave you the vision, or what even made you think that becoming who you are now was possible?
Well, it was the second most important man in my life, which was my stepfather. I remember I was in Dallas, Fort Worth, and I was getting C's and D's and F's. And I was going through this stage in my life, and I was always in like these gifted and talented programs and these magnet programs, always that, but I was a rebel, to say the least. And my dad looked at the TV and he said, if you get your grades up, you could be her. And I look at the TV and there's this woman, this black woman with this beautiful hair, because that's the first thing I remember seeing about her. And she had this very rich and thick and just powerful voice. And her name was Iola Johnson. And she was the first black woman to ever anchor the news in Texas. And at that moment, I saw her and I did see what I could be, and I know it sounds cliche. They say if you see it, you believe it. And for me, that was true. And then years later, once I was on local news, you'll love this because I ended up, there was Drew Pearson, who was the love of my life as a kid. I actually had his picture on my wall. That's how old I am. And I ran over to her to thank her. And she'd seen and heard of me, but then I said, you're the woman that I'm always talking about in this story. So I saw it. And it definitely set the course. I didn't know how much pain, though, that would also include talking about the pivot, because what I now know she must have experienced based on what I've experienced, I'm surprised she was even able to make it to that point.
What is some of that pain? I was going to ask, like that you have a goal, but then the journey has to happen. Like, what were some of them painful points?
Well, I mean, there's so many, but one in particular, I remember being in local news in Dallas, Fort Worth, and I'd gotten my big gig, the first reporting job. I specifically remember, and for reporting, I was making $45,000. That was a big deal because I was just out of college. And I was assigned the gang unit. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm a reporter, and I get it, we cover all kinds of things. I'm not a weather person, I'm not a meteorologist, but I cover the tornadoes in Texas. But I was on the gang unit. And something told me, like, they think I'm Black and I know gang culture. So and as I started to investigate and ask questions, sure enough, someone was like, well, you know. And I said, no, I don't know. I actually grew up on a farm. You know more I know gang because I watched the movie Colors.
Right.
That's all I know. Right. I don't know anybody. I don't know any signs. I know nothing. But instantly, I had to be from what they call the hood, because I don't even like that term. I know that we, again, use it as a term of endearment. I've been in newsrooms and I know how it's used when we're not in the room. I'm from the hood, I'm a certain type, and then suddenly it became, she's difficult, she's too loud, she's too. And so those were the most painful things early on that I didn't know how to respond to, because the minute you know someone thinks you're angry, what do? You shrink down. And I started to see myself shrinking down, and it started to affect my career. My first job, I was like the A1 reporter. And before I knew it, I was the 4 a.m. reporter.
Wow.
And I started to watch me become the person that they thought they could target and demote.
You talk about being the person they can target and demote. The one thing about this show is we can be real. You're two minorities, right? Being a woman is already going to make it more difficult for you. But being a Black woman and being the most marginalized.
It's the loneliest place in a newsroom, because you do look toward your white female colleagues for support. And so many times they were the facilitators. So a white male news director would say, well, put her on the gang unit. And then the assistant news director, who was a white female, because a lot of white females started to move up in the executive ranks. So you're thinking, okay, great, I have someone who will understand this journey. But then they would come to you. And there's one that comes to mind in particular who had a lot of power, but didn't use it to support me and other women of color. And I wasn't the only woman of color. I was the only Black woman, but we're in Texas, so we had one of my colleagues was an Asian American woman and a Latin American woman. And I felt that, and I still feel, that she was more preoccupied with getting in the C-suite than helping the female allies who were not white women. And it didn't, you know, when I look back at it now, I wonder, did it make me bitter at the time? I don't think so. I think it made my pivot so much more focused.
Yeah.
I'm a person that, you know, I tell people all the time, if I keep looking at the roadblocks, I can't see the road. And I believe that. And I think at that time, I saw her as a roadblock, but she was going to be one that I was going to roll over. And I don't say this to be petty or mean. She's not in the business anymore. And she has to watch me and wonder what maybe we could have built together had we been an ally. How many shows and how many things could we have done together? But I don't think she saw me as an ally because I'm a Black woman.